And with that, we have Whip Park. And I think you have a lady here who wants to speak to your bill,
Yes,
your
sir.
resolution.
She's
So,
angry at you for being late.
Apologies to the esteemed Alfeka, but thank you for joining us. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to present House Resolution 131 with y'all. That is LC 112-2809. Georgia has seen significant investment from the federal government and our state in terms of bridges, aviation, and ports. However, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we still have critical gaps around water pipes, stormwater infrastructure, traffic congestion, rail, and school construction. So, in essence, what this resolution is doing is proposing support for a national infrastructure bank. HR 131 urges Congress to establish a $5 trillion national infrastructure bank, reinforcing the calls from HR 4052 from the 118th Congress. The National Infrastructure Bank, or NIB, will fund critical infrastructure projects in line with the American Society of Civil Engineers' priorities, ensuring our roads, bridges, and public transit and water systems reach a true state of good repair. It would also support affordable housing and large-scale water projects addressing pressing needs across the country. What makes the NIB different is its funding approach. Unlike traditional federal spending, the NIB requires no new taxes or appropriations. Instead, it will be capitalized by exchanging a small portion of existing Treasury debt for preferred stock, generating returns for investors while complementing existing infrastructure programs. And Alfek, I'm sure, can speak more to any questions members may have as to the funding mechanism. Now, while I think the NIB, for me, certainly was an innovative idea, this idea isn't altogether new. The United States has successfully leveraged this form of developmental finance in the past. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation, established under President Hoover and expanded by FDR, played a pivotal role in rebuilding America during the Great Depression and World War II. Right here in Georgia, it funded thousands of projects, including the Rural Electrification Administration. So the National Infrastructure Bank follows in this tradition, offering a powerful tool to rebuild our country, create jobs, and invest in a stronger future for all Americans. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law of 2021 allocated $550 billion to rebuild America. But again, that was only a fraction of what is needed to modernize our infrastructure here in Georgia and across the country. With that law, that bipartisan infrastructure law set to expire next year in 2026, and given the current fiscal climate in Washington, making another major funding package unlikely, we need innovative solutions to help bridge that gap to ensure our country does not continue to fall behind, especially with respect to our infrastructure across the board. So if enacted, this initiative would secure about $158 billion over a decade, specifically for the state of Georgia. That's an estimated 788,000 high-wage jobs, revitalized roads and bridges, expanded public transit, and critical investments in both urban centers as well as in rural communities. So again, I think it's an interesting idea and certainly one that, warrants, exploration, given the pressing needs across the board throughout our state when it comes to infrastructure of all sorts. So with that, I'd be happy to turn it over to our special guest, Alfeka, for a few remarks.
Thank you very much.
Representative. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Who you are, and if you represent any organization or anything, who that is.
Yes. My name is Alfeka Mutardi. I am a macroeconomist. I worked for 25 years at the International Monetary Fund. Now I am the lead economist on this National Infrastructure Bank proposal and the bill, and I'm with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank, a grassroots consortium from across the United States that is trying to get this bill supported and passed by Congress. So with your permission, I'd like to just quickly go over some of the features of this bill and how specifically it can help Georgia. The bill that we had in Congress, HR 4052, as Rep. Park says, would develop a $5 trillion public bank to finance infrastructure projects that budgets have not been able to finance. That is the federal budget, state and local, or municipal bonds. So this would pick up all of the slack that is measured by the American Society of Civil Engineers, things we need to finance and fix and aren't getting financing right now. We're going to reintroduce this bill. We're actively seeking Republican support to make it bipartisan. When we had bills, when we had banks like this in our nation's past, we had 4 big ones, by the way. They were supported by 6 American presidents, completely bipartisan across the aisle. So this is not a Republican or Democratic idea. This is really an idea to rebuild our economy and boost our nation's infrastructure, make us more competitive around the world. The way the bank works is it operates just like any lending bank. It is capitalized using treasuries held by the private sector. Those investors will get a little bit extra boost on their dividends that comes out of interest earnings, with plenty of money left over to meet the bank's other operational needs, so that this bank is self-sustaining, requires no infusions from the federal budget to operate over time. Then it gives out a loan exactly the same as any commercial bank. And borrowers would be any public entity that has a bit of public infrastructure. A county, a city for a road, a bridge, a school can come in directly to the NIB and ask for a loan. We cover $5 trillion in project loans in 20 hard infrastructure categories, and that is enough money around the nation to repair all of our transportation needs, water systems, upgrade our electric power grid, and we also added high-speed rail, broadband everywhere, affordable housing, and some large-scale water projects in areas where we grow our nation's food so that the food prices won't spike. So out of all that, what's in it for the state of Georgia? As Rep. Parks mentioned, the state could qualify for up to $158 billion over 10 years to cover all of your backlog of infrastructure projects. From the bipartisan law, you're only going to get about a tenth as much. And as Rep. Park said, that requires a 20% copay, and the bill expires in a year and a half. So this would also provide 788,000 new family-sustaining wage jobs in the state. We'll train up workers for these new great fields. We can fully finance big-ticket items like high-speed rail from Atlanta to Charlotte, or solving Atlanta's traffic congestion problem, which is the 8th worst in the United States. Anything that's on your report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers would be addressed by this bank. That includes roads, which are pretty good in the state of Georgia, albeit that they're congested, drinking water that needs $10 billion over 10 years, $4.4 billion just for DeKalb County alone, lead water service lines that need to be replaced, stormwater systems need $6 billion, sewers, both rural and urban, need lots of work. We know you have plans to expand your electric power grid to meet new demand. The state is fast growing, and there are new data centers which are demanding a lot of power. We want to expand the port of Savannah and its inland transportation, which will need lots of work and coordination of projects. And you have 540 high hazard dams that need to be addressed. Well, plus the bank will build lots of affordable housing, at least 215,000 affordable units. You had a great project in Atlanta with the 2 Peachtree towers that were converted from office over to shops and affordable apartments. And the bank can do more projects like that. Local planning commissions, that means you get to choose and design these projects. And that'll really supercharge your growth is already great, but this will really put your growth rate for the state on steroids and improve your state finances even more. It'll reduce inflation, especially the cost of housing, grow businesses, and restore manufacturing in the state. So all those are benefits. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I don't see any. Sound like a very aggressive, big money project. If it could fix the streets here in Atlanta, I think it would be might be a success, especially Piedmont going downtown. My gosh, what a terrible street that is. Um, where would it incur? I mean, would it not? I'll just ask you this. I mean, I mean, theoretically, if it were, but I mean, that would be a tremendous amount of debt, uh, a tremendous amount of debt. And who buys those bonds? I mean, it just seems like it would be problematic. I mean, I'm just asking. I don't want to say that would it not be problematic for the debt?
So actually, this is the secret sauce to the bank is how much it grows the economy. And there are historical examples. All four banks grew the economy so much so that the debt sort of disappeared. But for every dollar that's borrowed, there we have economic modeling. Every dollar that's borrowed from the bank, it creates $3 new in GDP, new production, and that provides plenty of tax receipts to pay back the loans. An example that Rep. Parks alluded to is the electrification of Georgia. 80% of rural farms in Georgia had no electricity in 1933. Everybody told FDR, don't lend to them because they won't be able to pay you back. In fact, the farmers became much more productive. They got trained up in doing the electrical work themselves. All the loans were paid back. And some of the cooperatives are still in existence today. Another example is TVA. Tennessee Valley was very poor, even by Depression standards. All of that got built, produced great electricity for 7 states. Aluminum smelters and other kinds of things came off of it, and all of the loans were paid back. So great examples, both domestic and in other countries around the world, of how this kind of investment grows the economy so fast that you can pay back the loans.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's a very interesting, interesting issue. I wanted to ask you about what this is doing is urging Congress to pass legislation. You mentioned a bill number, a House, I don't know what kind of bill number, but a bill in the U.S. Congress.
Right.
That's an active bill. It's active right now. Is that correct?
It will be reintroduced. We're currently looking for some Republican sponsors to make it bipartisan because we really think that every single district, red, blue, rural, urban, will benefit from this bank. And we're going to try one more time to make it bipartisan. But it's so timely now because with budget cuts, we're not even sure that the money that has been promised from the bipartisan law will be flowing to Georgia. There's going to be budget cuts because the federal debt is so high. This will complement anything that Georgia needs and is not getting from the federal government.
So if they can show that the amount of growth that would come out of it, I mean, that's what has to happen when you have debt. You got to be able to have enough growth to cover the debt and the debt service. So that's an interesting prospect. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear Chuck Martin from Alpharetta. So the initial seed money would come in what form? I mean, it's
the initial seed money will be to capitalize the bank. All banks need capital put in by the investors, and that would come from private holders of treasuries. There's about $28 trillion of treasuries held in private hands. We just need a little bit of it to come in to capitalize the bank, and they'll swap that for preferred stock and get a little dividend boost.
We're going to fund the bank with treasuries that are debt from a country that's $39 trillion in debt.
It's already out there.
To be honest, I mean, if this is a viable situation, why does a commercial bank not do it?
Commercial banks have their own lending policies. They're really looking for a higher rate of return. They can lend for infrastructure projects. They usually do it through the municipal bond market, but it doesn't make them very much money. They would rather invest in other things like the stock market or derivatives or things that'll provide them with a higher rate of return. And the proof of the pudding is if they could invest in infrastructure across the country, they would be doing so now.
Okay, I'm curious about going into this further, so look forward to talking to you again.
If you would like another presentation, we're free to provide one in more detail.
Okay.
And I'll make sure Whit Park is here on time. Just kidding. I'm just joking with our good friend.
Hey, Representative Coy, you have one question. I know people are, got other meetings. We're getting ready to extend or going over our time. So if you have a question, time.
Mine is really not a question, but as a licensed civil engineer, I would encourage us to look into this bill. I haven't looked at the details, but anything to help improve our infrastructure, that should be encouraged. It'll give my company some work too.
Mm. Thank you, ma'am, for your presentation. We may want to hear more from you and at a later date, before long, actually. So Whit Park, thank you for this. It's an interesting proposition. I mean, this is just encouraging Congress to do something.
Yes, sir.
So it's interesting. It's a urging resolution, and I appreciate you bringing it very much.
Thank you for the
Thank
opportunity.
you. And that will be actually assigned to Energy Subcommittee chaired by Chairman Martin. Also, is that it? I don't think it's all. So anything from members for the good of the order? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.